Favorite movie and why?
I'll give you two. First is The Sandlot. That's the first one. That's the one I grew up on. And I mean, just classic, being a baseball kid in Southern California. It was just like, I don't know how many times I've watched that one. And the other was Varsity Blues, which is kind of in a similar sense. But
yep.
I played a lot of sports growing up. And so, and I had a rather, I went to Catholic school. So I saw these guys, having a great time in high school. I was like, maybe.
You're like, wait a minute. These girls wear whipped cream bikinis?
Yeah,
this is what happens at public school?
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking.
Exactly. I feel like there's two types of men. There's men who love coming of age stories and movies and TV shows. And then there's men that don't. And I don't trust the men who don't. Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am here with my old friend Hector. I'm going to let him tell you what he does because I still don't understand what he does. But he works in the technology field of podcasting, in the production field of podcasting. We're old friends from the Miracle Morning Quantum Leap Mastermind Group. This podcast not officially sponsored by El Pollo Loco, but we stopped at El Pollo Loco. So you are going to see here free advertisements for you, El Pollo, because I love your chicken chipotle avocado burrito. But Hector and I go way back to the Miracle Morning days when Hal was still running his mastermind group. I think we were like part of the inaugural class. Since then, we've run into each other at Front Row Dads. You're a father, you're a business owner, you're dealing with all the same bullshit I am as an entrepreneur, trying to attract clients, trying to keep clients, trying to grow your business. And yeah, man, the first podcast we did, it's like one of 150 where the audio didn't work out. I'm like, here I am interviewing a podcast guru and I fucked up the audio. So I was like, hey, next time you're in Vegas, let's get together. Here we are. It's Vegas. It's sunny out. We're smoking a lot. Hence the glasses. We'll just leave it at that. And how the hell you been, man?
Life is, how have I been? I guess that's what we're here to talk about, right? It's been a wild ride, and the last several years have been a lot of life, and I'm grateful to have you alongside. So grateful to be here.
Thanks, man. So first of all, tell me, what are your kids into these days? Because we've got kids that are both like 2 years apart, a boy and a girl, right? And they're a couple of years younger than mine. So what are you and the kids into these days?
I've got a 4 and a 5-year-old, and they are. My little guy, I'm forcing him into jiu-jitsu. We've talked about that a lot. But,
yep.
But he's been, I'm not going to say who said it, but he could use a little toughness in his life. So it's going to be good for him. And it's been great to see his growth over the last few months, staying consistent with it. Cause like really over the last couple of weeks, he got a little aggression out of him. So it was good to see. It was vindicating for me as a dad. My daughter is she's a little acrobat, gymnastics we've been trying to get her in gymnastics, but for some reason it's like a pain in the ass to find a good, easy, simple gymnastics program for, a 4-year-old. Everybody's like, there are some nationalities out there that are trying to take over the world, and they're trying to, there's these crazy, intense gymnastic teams, and then there's these other, it's just a whole mess. But that's her thing. She's a little bit of a performer. And
like gymnastics and cheer, if you're not willing to be like, hey, 18 hours a week, we travel on the weekends, we're driving to Barstow for a competition. I'm like, dude, she's 5. Like, I don't need my 5-year-old wearing a midriff and makeup and the hair. And like, I just want her to learn how to tumble and not break her neck.
We're just trying to get energy out. That's all.
Yeah,
we're just trying to get them to go to sleep at the end of the night. That's all. Like, we don't need to be hopping on buses yet. We don't need to be driving cross country quite yet.
Yeah.
We just, we want to be home and get to bedtime and make it that easy.
It's kind of like the college thing. Like there's some schools, especially private schools right now, where it's like you have to be on the Harvard track in kindergarten. And I'm like, no, I just want my kid to not pee his pants, tie his shoe, maybe learn his alphabet. Like we're not thinking about Harvard yet. There's so many programs now where it's like, hey man, like my kid's not going to be an Olympic athlete. Like that's just not in the cards for our family genotype. So how about you just help me get some energy out of them, get them to bed.
Yeah. Let's stick with, let them be kids still. I think that was something that we were talking on the way over here. My parents did the after school run around. And so, there was times where I was playing 3 or 4 sports at one time, and it was just, I thought it was normal, but looking back on it, there was no time to rest or to decompress or to, it was just constant going. And I also don't know if I was doing it because I wanted to do it or because they just said that this was the thing that I was going to do and it was the next kind of thing to sign up for. And I go down that track and 18, 20 years down that path, only to look up like, well, was I actually spending time doing things? You know, I'm 5'6". What am I doing playing basketball? Why are you putting me in basketball? Like, and it's not like you look at my parents like, well, maybe he's going to hit a growth spurt.
Yeah.
There's no shot.
Yeah.
And like, so my thing with my kids is like trying to figure out what are they drawn to, and what are we not going to have to force them into. And the jiu-jitsu thing is one thing, but I feel strongly that, you know, boys should be able to defend themselves, and they should have those sort of skills that you kind of develop through martial arts. But also I want to get, you know, he's an artist, he's an engineer, he's, you know, we want to get him into art schools and getting him doing, you know, painting and doing all that shit, because that's what he can just do forever. He'll knock out 30 or 40 pictures, you know. Here, Dad, I made another one for you. I made another one for you. I made another one for you. It's like, dude, I love you, but let's make a pile. For sure. Yeah. Like, why don't you stack them all up and then bring them all to me when you're done? Because otherwise, you know, we're going back and forth the whole day.
It's so funny, man, because like it's like a yes and. We want our kids in swim lessons. We want our kids in jiu-jitsu. We want them doing the Kumon school stuff and like consistently getting better. But then sometimes I look at my wife and I'm like, hey, man, like can we just put them in the yard and have them play in the dirt? Because like, one, I think that's good for them. And two, I can't think right now. Like I've been thinking all week. I've been podcasting. I've been doing loans. I've been doing coaching. Like I just want to sit down and watch stupid YouTube videos. And so it's very interesting to see what we do for our kids and the sacrifices we make. And then really, are they just as happy playing in the dirt if we just leave them in the front yard for a couple hours? Probably.
Right. Yeah.
So tell us about your business, man.
So I've got a podcast production company. We produce.
What does that even mean? Like that wasn't even a job like 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. We produce podcasts. So much of like this, you know, there's a lot of people who they want to record and they think, I don't want to say they think, but a lot of people have this conception or misconception that podcasting is hopping on and recording and just talking or just hopping on and talking. And everybody sees this and they go, fucking Scott's just smoking a cigar, shooting the shit. Like I could do that. But they also don't know we just spent 20 minutes dealing with cameras and dealing with mics. And we also, you know, there's all this internal stuff that goes along with it. And then you also have, you know, like 6 other businesses that you're running. And so
right.
the podcast is, there's a lot of pieces to it. And so we handle all the pieces to, you know, in the same way that a lot of, you know, the actor isn't making the movie, you know, he's got someone else to kind of make the movie. He goes in, provides the talent. We're kind of the backside of that. We do a lot of the production and the editing, the publishing, making sure that it gets out. So our clients, they just hop in and talk, and then they do just shoot the shit and we handle the rest.
And where do you come in, right? Because I'm thinking like this show was really easy because it was like COVID. We were printing money in the mortgage space. I didn't have to monetize the podcast, which it is not monetized. Anybody watching this, if you could leave a couple hours up on YouTube just playing in the background, I would greatly appreciate it. But you know, I just did it as a passion project. Like, let's talk to some libertarians. Let's talk to some whoever. Like, I'll literally talk to anybody. The weird thing is, I can't get a lot of liberals to have good conversations. I've invited everyone from progressive to communist to liberal to like blue dog Democrat, and like none of them want to come on and talk. But so whatever. And I'm not like trying to be like, I gotcha. I want to really hear what like the other side of the aisle has to say. I've had one girl, Allison Gilbert. Shout out to Allison for being brave and coming on, and we had a great conversation. But anyway, I just wanted to talk to people. I had no plans, but I have to think most people that are putting the time and energy into a podcast, like they have to have a result, or they have to have a goal, or there has to be a business thesis or something. So are people
no, you're bringing a practical perspective to it. Some people they do it for vanity because they're like,
oh, that's why I do it.
Oh, it would be cool.
It's fun and it's vanity.
They do it because they think it's easy. You know, and then that they think there's not a lot to it.
Not easy. Spoiler alert.
And then the other side of it is that they, you know, some of them are artists, right? And they have a message to get out. And I think that during COVID, a lot of people didn't have shit to do. And they were sitting there thinking about what do I care about? And how can I get this out to the world? No, I don't have anyone to talk to. So let me talk into this microphone and let me kind of get it out to the world. And so that's when I think it like really caught on that this whole podcast thing became, I think, mainstream. We were all sitting around, like Clubhouse was all kind of happening.
But what happened to Clubhouse, man?
I mean, people went outside again.
Yeah.
You know, it's
fair.
Like, that works if everybody's sitting at home, but who wants to sit at home and just stare at a bunch of people's profile pictures and listen to one person talk? I mean, it's cool given the circumstances, but I don't think that I think it had a shelf life. Even kind of Twitter Spaces started to do that for a little bit, and that's kind of dwindled because people just have shit to do.
Right.
You know, there's so much shit to do that to ask someone to show up for anything is a big ask. And so to answer your question, though, a few years before, it was probably back in 2016, I was looking for anything under the sun to, ways to make money online. This was kind of maybe a year or two after we had met. And I had a marketing agency for real estate agents and realized that I did a lot. They're great people, but that was not the market or the niche for me. And so kind of moved on from that and was looking at what to do. And I had a nonprofit reach out to me, and we started working on their podcast. And then I had another, he was a plumbing business. He coached plumbing business owners, kind of similar to coaching loan officers, but it was just for plumbing business owners.
Super niche.
It's very niche, and, teaching business tactics and, that sort of side of it. And he reached out and he was like, hey, can you make those clips for, like, we don't have the time to make all these little clips on social media, and Instagram was just started to allow video. And they're like, can you make those clips and add those little captions and, make it all snazzy and stuff? It's similar. He wanted to sit up there and talk. He was good at talking, but he didn't, nor did his team, and they didn't have the support to do all the editing and the video and shit. And so, I said, yeah, I can do that. And I had another person, actually, that we had the Front Row Dads. They were one of our early clients, and we started making videos for them. And we had another one, and I was like, this podcast thing seems to be like something that's happening. And so we just kind of pivoted and started serving that space more. And then when 2020 came around, we were kind of ready, because we had been doing it for a few years, and we started off doing a lot of the marketing and promotion of it. And now we do all of the editing and production and even the show design and show development as well.
So I don't want to go into like all 400 steps that happens after a podcast is done, but give somebody a lay of the land. Because I think people are like, well, I'll just record it and post it. It's like, oh no, because there is a different way to post to Anchor versus YouTube versus Instagram versus, I'm always frustrated because some of like our best clips are 2.5 minutes. Oh, but Instagram only allows 90 seconds. I mean, there's so many little intricacies. So can you give a rundown of like, okay, after the podcast is done, you can go do all this yourself, or you can give me a couple grand and I'll do it all for you. Give us like a rundown of like the dirty.
So we take the podcast today. It's rather easier. I don't want to say it's easy, but it's simpler to clean up a lot of the stuff. So we take out all the ums and clean up all that sort of stuff to make it make someone sound much better than they actually might be recorded. And then we'll edit it up and do all the normal stuff that you might think will go along with audio editing. And I guess the magic happens when we go and we upload it in one shot. It goes out to, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all the different podcasts. There's a dozen of other podcast places. And then we'll take the best clips and get those out to YouTube and Instagram and LinkedIn and all that sort of stuff. So you can essentially hop in for an hour, talk for an hour, and then you've got, a week or 2 weeks worth of social media content posted, throughout it. And so that's kind of our goal, is to create what we call a pillar piece of content, and then be able to break those into different splinters, or splinter those off into blog posts or social media posts or YouTube videos or LinkedIn newsletters, those sorts of things.
So something I've been thinking of, and you just reminded me, as a matter of fact, because we haven't been posting our stuff to LinkedIn. Is there a saturation point where it's like, hey, if I've got a Rumble account and a LinkedIn account and a locals account and then YouTube, there's 90 different competitors to all of these different pillars that we know of, like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Those are probably the big three. But would you take the time and energy to be like, well, I don't know, maybe my audience is living on locals.com or it's living on Rumble or something like that. Do you recommend posting it on all of these different sites? Or is it like, no, man, Scott, we've done a market analysis. Loan officers and realtors are going to be on Instagram. Let's really just lean into Instagram. Or like, how are you advising the business side of it?
I think that it's important to separate what you said, like pillar and splinter sort of content. So you've got these places like Rumble and YouTube, and I would even say that like Apple and Spotify, you can put them over there. I would say with those, if you have the bandwidth and you have the know-how to be able to upload it, a lot of times it's just a couple of extra button clicks. It's 2 or 3. There's an initial setup with the account, and then maybe you've got to figure out where to put stuff. But generally, you're copying and pasting and using much of the same media and assets that you would be for all of those things. So there's very little changing. It's very much copy and paste. So I would say as wide as you can go with those pieces makes sense. Where I don't recommend that is with the splinter. Let's call it like the social media parts that you could spin your wheels in places that don't make any sense.
Yeah.
LinkedIn being one of them for certain audiences, and similarly Instagram for other audiences. You've kind of got to figure out where you can go. It doesn't always make sense to, do the Grant Cardone sort of strategy at first, which is, be everywhere all at once, because those platforms require some nuance and they require some adjustment, and the captions should be different for Instagram than LinkedIn and, you know, all these different places. So that's kind of how we approach that.
So is it a demographic thing? Is like, I don't know how to explain this. I asked the question, but is it like the TikTok demographic is much younger, so the captions have to look different and stuff? Is it that? Or is it just like there's nuance in how you post and build an audience there? Because I have, you know, very surface level, I've watched a couple of videos on like posting on TikTok versus Instagram, and it is different. Like the in-tool editor is completely different, which means the look and feel is different. So it's like you can kind of tell when content is bastardized from one platform to another. But does that really matter? Like, does it really matter if I'm watching an Instagram reel that has like the TikTok watermark in the bottom? Like, I don't really care. I just think it's funny.
You know, obviously good content is going to just be good content. So that's going to outweigh everything. But when we're talking about the margins here, the only thing that's definitive is that Instagram knows when you're posting stuff from TikTok and vice versa. And they actually reward you, you know, for spending the time to use their features, and they're monitoring how long it takes for you to post a video. So if you're just re-uploading it from TikTok, you're not adding any of their features, you're not kind of using the Instagram tools, they're going to know that, and they're going to assume that it's probably posted from somewhere else. Or what they do is they conversely favor the videos a little bit that do take the time to do that. So in the data that they've kind of shown, or like the studies that I've seen, like you get like a 1.2x bump if you use their features. And so there's all these sorts of things that they found that you can increase your likelihood of getting reach on a platform by doing these things for Instagram. And then there's this other set of things for, say, TikTok or LinkedIn, and you know, kind of every platform has these almost unique set of checklists that make posts more likely to go viral, if you will.
I think about this because, like, obviously for so many of these platforms, the holy grail is like virality, right? Because it's like, okay, you want more people to see your stuff and maybe buy more of your content or get more familiar with you. But we have a mutual friend, Mike Eaton, comedian, hilarious guy. Like really like up and comer in the whole Austin scene. He's done his first couple of gigs at like Joe Rogan's thing, and he's getting good. I saw him deliver his first full hour set, and it was tight. He's gotten so much better over the last 5 years. But he had this one comedic reel where he was talking about some movie with like little people that Matthew McConaughey was in, that like nobody knows about this movie, and he was talking about that, and the reel was well edited. I believe it got tens of millions of views, and he picked up like 12 followers from it. So he's like, all right, well, great. I went viral, but like, I rather have 20 rock star fans that saw me at a show, interacted with me, followed my Instagram, versus like, all right, cool, I got 30 million views on this video and I picked up 12 followers. Like it just seems like the math is not predictable when it comes to social media.
For sure. I mean, I don't know if the platforms have said it, but it's essentially a slot machine. I mean, they liken posts and reels especially to a slot machine in that they've even shown that you post this same video twice, 2 different times, and it just, one performs better for no other reason than it just got a better luck of the draw. Because the way that it works is that the way that these kind of shorts, and we're specifically talking about like YouTube shorts,
Instagram short material,
reels, TikToks, is they'll send it out to, say, 100 people. Every video will be 100. You know, it'll go through the first 100 people, and they'll gauge whether or not the video is engaging, and then they'll if it's engaging enough, then they'll go to 1,000 people. They'll amp the sample size up, and they'll say, okay, if it still continues to perform with that 1,000, then we'll keep bumping it up to the 10 and to the whatever. And so if it reaches these points, if it passes, you know, the algorithm's test of whether or not it's engaging enough, then it'll shoot it to the next stage in it. The challenge is that when you're brand new, if it's only giving 100, if it's only shooting it out to 100 people, if you don't have a lot of followers, or you're new reel or whatever it may be, I mean, you're just shooting dark. You're shooting in the dark. And so if the algorithm misses with those 100, or those 100 have no idea who you are and they don't engage, I mean, then there's your likelihood, you know, it goes much down. And so if you've got a large following, that helps, because that first 100, they're going to send it to your followers. gonna naturally kind of do what it does. So that's why it is a slot machine like effect, because you don't know who those first 100 or those first 1,000, and unless the algorithm knows who to send your material to, it's just guessing.
Yeah. So here's the stats on this video. Mike explaining the show Tiptoes, or the movie Tiptoes, with Matthew McConaughey, where he's like, he's from a family of little people and his wife does, or his girlfriend doesn't know, and it's hilarious.
Have you seen Tiptoes?
What's Tiptoes?
Oh, buddy. It is an early 2000s film that somehow snuck under the radar. Matthew McConaughey, Kate Beckinsale, they're a couple. She gets pregnant. Matthew McConaughey is freaked out about it, so he buries himself in work in Malibu. One day, while he's at work, his twin brother shows up, played by Gary Oldman. But his twin brother is a little person. In fact, his whole family and everyone else that he's related to is a little person. Matthew McConaughey is the only regular-sized one. So now Kate Beckinsale is freaked out that her baby's going to be a little person. Peter Dinklage plays one of Gary Oldman's motorcycle gang members. His girlfriend is Patricia Arquette.
Oh my God.
He has a French accent for some reason, and he walks around with a jug of cognac and morphine. Matthew brings Kate to meet his family. There's a huge party, and there's 100+ little people there of every different shape, size, and flavor, but all very small. They walk in, and she goes, "Geez, you could have told me your whole family was midgets." And he goes, "They're not midgets, Carol. They're dwarves."
He got 13.3 million views. 600,000 people liked it. 680,000 people reshared it or sent it to somebody. 3,000 comments, and he picked up like 12 followers. Now, in my mind, if I watch a whole 60-second video, and especially if I share it, and it's a comedian, and I know they're going to be putting out more content, like I'm giving that guy a follow, right? Like maybe I'm in the minority, like people are so jaded that they just don't want to follow people. But I'm like, bro, right after I saw this video, like catching fire, I'm like, oh, here's like your moment where you're going to pick up 10,000 fans that are now going to see your future stuff. And like, you're just like 3 months away from a Netflix special. And he's like, nah, dude, picked up like 12 followers. And I'm like, damn, that's so unfair. I was just frustrated for him. One, because I want him to succeed. And two, like everything is political. These days, you're way more likely to get an Instagram or a Netflix show if you've got 200,000 Instagram followers who will watch the Netflix show, right? So it's like, I just want him to succeed at such a high level. I was pissed for him that the virality of that reel didn't do more for his career.
I think the reality is that we're probably judging it too soon, because we'll probably look back and we'll see that was the first one of these things. Because what the algorithm also is able to do is it's also pretty good at facial recognition and all the sorts of stuff. So if it starts to see, if Mike puts out more videos and more videos start to catch a little bit more fire, it doesn't even have to be posted from his account. The algorithm will start to know that this person likes Mike just because they're spending time watching a video with his face on it. And that will start to kind of gather. So I think like this is we'll probably look back on it and say like, oh, that was the one. Because there's usually one that unlocks the algorithm, if you will, because now the algorithm knows and has a sample size or a data set of people who they know are likely to interact with this stuff. So they're going to push it to those people first before just guessing with some other, person.
Yeah.
So,
one of the things I like about you, because, Chris and I did a consult with you to kind of get some ideas. And, if Chris ever got hit by a bus, which I don't want to have happen, then you would just step in and replace him overnight. But one of the things that I really appreciate about you, much like our friend Chandler Bolt, who runs Self-Publishing School, he tells people like, hey, man, just to be clear, nobody makes money off of books. Nobody. Unless you're J.K. Rowling or Stephen King, nobody is making a living off of writing books. But what you can do is a book is an amazing business card, or it's an amazing lead magnet for a coaching program. Or, if that guy you were mentioning writes a book on growing a plumbing business, now all of a sudden, like, no one who's a plumber is going to throw away that book. It might be 2 years before they crack it open and read it, but it's just a tool for other business development. And similarly, when you and I talked, you're like, hey, man, almost nobody monetizes their podcast. Very few people get sponsorship money. Very few people ever recoup the cost on the podcast of making the podcast. But here's the other things you want to be thinking about in the business development realm because you have a podcast. So can you kind of walk us through what you're telling your clients when you're like, hey, man, what you're going to pay me plus the equipment plus the time investment, you're never going to make that money back on, monetizing YouTube. But what you could do is XYZ when we think through like growing your business with a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people want to be like the next Joe Rogan, and he's
I mean, it wouldn't be a bad gig.
No. But what they also don't realize is that he's 1,300 episodes in. He started back in 2009, I think, something like that. You know, if you listen to his first episode, it was horrendous. He was sponsored by Fleshlights. You know, it was his first sponsor.
Fleshlights.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know what a fleshlight is, Google it when you don't have children in the room.
Yeah, and just watch your ads for the next little bit. And so I think that a lot of people, they think, oh, that's the model, right? Let me come in and let me get a bunch of sponsors, or let me try and make the show the business. And to your point, the show is a great. I think it's gone beyond the business card. And a lot of people leverage the book to do this, but in the same way that someone might write a book to establish themselves as the person in an industry, a podcast is a similar way to do it. It's just great for people who like to talk instead of write. But what we try and do is we try and focus on, there's 3 core things that we're looking to do. The first is we're looking to get them to introduce to people who can actually drive them business, potential clients, potential partners, industry organizations. One of the shows, actually a mutual friend, Matt Drinkon, he on one of the first, I think it was like episode 8, maybe episode 9, something doesn't matter. An early episode, we had no listeners, no following. We had Mark Victor Hansen on, the guy who wrote Chicken Soul for the Soup. And him and Matt hit it off, and they started doing some business together. He signed a huge coaching contract with Mark's company and started coaching their company. They continued to develop that relationship. And I believe next week he's publishing his book that Mark is publishing for him. And so that relationship started on the podcast.
Right.
You know, they hit it off on the podcast. And so that, you can't trace that to a download. You can't trace that. That didn't come directly from a sponsor, but it came from the connections that come from, being able to sit down across the table from someone for an hour, or across a Zoom or a video, wherever it is that you're doing. So those, if a business can benefit from networking, from connections, from that sort of stuff, if relationships are valuable in a certain industry, and they're, obviously I think they're valuable in any industry, but there are some where that's a bigger lever to pull than others. You can really help. The second thing that we look to do is, the easiest way to call it is like thought leadership. But what the fuck does that actually mean, right? The way that we think about it is, can we get industry organizations, people who have, audiences, or not even audiences, just organizations, communities of people that they need to give value to. We launched a show recently. I don't know if you're familiar with, I'm actually going to not share his name. I don't know if he wants me to share that, but it's a mutual friend of ours in the Front Row Dads. And we launched a show for him. And he had another industry organization that had like a coalition of, 700 people in the industry that were kind of paying members. It was like an industry association, and they needed to do some training on a particular sort of thing. And they're like, hey, will you just put out a podcast on this exact topic? Can we pay you like $70,000 to come, do this coaching that you're already talking about? And
amazing.
And, I think we're like, once again, like 10 episodes in, but in that short amount of time, you can kind of establish or solidify yourself as someone who is, obviously you got to know what you're talking about, but if you do, and you can, explain it well enough, well, then the show becomes a great thing to do that. It's also great. I know a lot of loan officers or maybe real estate professionals are listening to this. It's a great way to, handle objections or stay in touch with people throughout. We have a lot of sales professionals that will record podcasts on a particular objection or a particular issue or a challenge, and then they'll send that to their prospect. And it's so much softer of a landing than, hey, listen to this webinar, or even listen to this Loom, or listen to this whatever, because they're listening to it on Spotify. Because they're listening to it on Spotify or their Apple Podcasts or whatever, all of a sudden their guard drops a little bit, and then your, prestige, but your sort of branding is kind of elevated because they're hearing you on Spotify, and it's the same place they listen to Joe Rogan or whatever.
Right.
So there's some sort of association there.
Yeah, there's a little of that network effect, right? It's like if I trust Joe and Scott has a podcast that's like now showing up underneath Joe, that's a thing, right? That's exactly I've got a friend. She's like, hey, I ran across the fact that you have a podcast, and I was like, oh, really? How did you do that? You see something on social? She's like, no, it was the weirdest thing. Like, my algorithm must know that you and I talk. There's like some IP address cross coordination or something. And I listen to that serial killer podcast all the time. And all of a sudden, right below it is like On the Edge podcast with Scott Groves. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool because Serial has like, I don't know, 1 billion downloads and I have like 100. So that's cool that I showed up next to that person and you got to see that at podcast. Now, unfortunately, the topic she happened to run across on my podcast was not somewhere where we align. So that might have done more harm than good, but it was kind of cool to see that. And, you know, that's interesting. I didn't really think of the education. We have a mutual friend, John Israel, that has a keynote on this framework called LEAD. And it's about how humans can stay out ahead of AI or online service providers or just basically humanize things so you're not getting wiped out by tech. And his LEAD framework is you can lead, you can educate, you can advocate, or you can delight. So like as this pertains to loan officers, the only way we can stand out against Rocket Mortgage is we can lead the client to the promised land of owning a house. We can educate them. We can advocate for them during the deal, like to help get their offer accepted, and we can delight them. We can make the process a little bit more entertaining and maybe throw out an appropriate level joke sometimes. But that education piece has always been hard for me because it's like, oh man, do I really want to spend half an hour with every single client explaining to them the chart of how home ownership is the #1 wealth creation tool in America? No, I don't have the time. 80 clients a month who we're pre-approving to do half an hour. Like that'd be a full-time job. But if I can record one podcast and send it out as a like, hey man, I did this podcast a couple months ago about how to like basically obtain wealth through home ownership. You know, we were talking about a family member of yours who bought in Santa Monica a long, long time ago. I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing any of those numbers, but like, I'm sure that family member acquired a lot more wealth owning a home in Santa Monica for 30 years than they did, you know, buying silver or gold or whatever else they would have done. So I don't know. That's a really interesting angle I hadn't thought about.
Well, we love podcasts in industries where I don't know if I would venture to say that, you know, mortgage officers are commoditized, but
I would.
Okay. I just don't want to overstep any boundaries. But in those,
trust me, it's
in
me.
those industries, you know, even accounting or real estate professionals, agents, you know, even lawyers to an extent, what separates somebody other than what they know? You know, obviously them as a person and you know, them, the interpersonal relationship you have with them, but sans that, if your loan officer has a podcast and you're listening on your way to work to your loan officer, like all of a sudden that connection that you have with them goes way deeper. I was talking with actually, you know, our producer Kevin today, and we were talking about how sometimes
shout out Kevin standing in for Chris.
Yeah, when we are talking to our clients, that we have to like remind ourselves that we know them way more than they know us, because we've listened to, you know, all these episodes, and they share, you know, I'm sure people who listen to the show feel like, oh yeah, I know Scott. And if they were to show up, maybe you have a connection with them, but they probably know way more about you than you do about them because of, you know, what happens in this kind of what's called a parasocial relationship. And I think that is not being leveraged enough in these commoditized industries, because they're out there trying to send out emails or trying to have coffee dates or kind of do all these things that are sure, like scale the unscalable things for sure, but also why not leverage the things that you can easily scale?
Yeah. You know what's interesting where this shows up is when I was in my 20s, so this is pre-podcast, pre-social media, I run into Magic Johnson at a Lakers game. Mm-hmm. And growing up, like the Lakers were the one thing that like my mom would let my dad do without bitching and complaining about him. It's like, okay, this is your one thing, you can watch the Lakers game, right? And this is like Showtime Lakers, 80s, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, Michael Cooper. Like, I mean, it was just amazing. So like running into Magic Johnson was as close as running into like the A++ celebrity. And I ran into him at the dessert cart in the box section of Staples Center. And I couldn't get a fucking word out because I'm like, this guy is such this unreachable superstar, blah, 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 blah. That was in my 20s. Fast forward to a couple months ago, I'm sitting at a barbecue joint in Austin, and Daniel Cormier, who's like my favorite UFC fighter of all time, one, because he's a little chubby. Two, he came from a wrestling background and basically parlayed that into a massively successful championship UFC career. I've heard him on so many podcasts and so many shows, there was no like weird, I was starstruck. We just happened to be sitting next to the table next to him. I'm like, hey, Daniel, huge fan, da-da-da-da. I actually think you're even a better commentator than you were fighter. And we got up and we had a chat with him and we took a picture. And it was more like talking to a friend. And I mean, this guy doesn't fucking know me from Adam. He's never going to remember this random dude who wanted to take a picture with him at some barbecue joint. But there was no apprehension in talking to him because I'm like, oh, I know this dude. I listen to his, it's not his podcast, but I've heard him on a million MMA podcasts. And I'm like, that's kind of a weird reality shift in the modern day. But it's exactly to what you're talking about. What did you call it?
It's called parasocial relationship.
Parasocial relationship.
I didn't make that up.
Yeah, no, we're not that smart. But yeah, talk a little bit more about that. Like why? Because there's the other side to that coin is this poor motherfucker can't eat barbecue without 5 people interrupting him.
The obvious example, have you seen that? I think she's Chinese. I don't know. Jesus. I think she's Chinese, but she's like the Chinese live streamer where she only displays a product for like 3 seconds and she like holds up a shirt and just throws it. Have you seen that video?
No.
It comes across. I'm gonna see if I can pull it up here. But I think that it's really it's evident of where we've kind of gone with this whole parasocial relationship. And the reason I say that is because people are trusting. You know, they don't. There's so much information out there that in order to parse through it, we need to have people that we can trust. And so that's why we look to influencers. That's why we look to people to see what kind of products, you know, should we buy. It's literally all she does is they send her a box down like this table. She holds it up for 3 seconds. She sends it away. And she thinks she made something like dozens of millions of dollars through the sponsorships and such because people, they see that, they trust her, they know that, you know, she's got millions and millions of followers or whatever it is, and it moves money, you know? So it's like,
yeah.
So that's like the end of it. Where I think it obviously can be used for good, it can be used for evil, but I think really people don't know what to trust in. There's no trust in the system.
Right.
So they're looking for anything that they can latch onto and people are the most relatable, and so they're looking for these people that are relatable or that they can relate to, and basically asking them what they should think, you know, telling them what they should believe.
You know, it's interesting you bring up the trust thing. A friend of mine, and I won't use his name because we're in a business professional relationship, but my agreement with anybody who ever wants to argue about politics or libertarian stuff or whatnot, I was like, hey, let's do a book swap. I'll send you a book, you send me a book, we'll read it and we'll check it out. Very few people ever take me up on this because they don't want to read a book of a difference of opinion, right? But shout out to my buddy who did. And he sent me a book called I think it's called The Death of Expertise or The Death of the Expert or something like that. And it was basically because information is so ubiquitous and you can do all of your own research and the media has been caught lying to us once in a while. You know, the experts have been caught lying to us once in a while. Like there's just this real death of expertise or this death of like the expert, which in some ways I think is super empowering. And in some ways is like, kind of scary because like the dude setting up, I don't know, the next roller coaster my kids are going to go on. I kind of want that guy to be an expert in structural engineering, right? So I don't want to have to question that guy. I just want to know that he knows his fucking job. But it was an enlightening book in the sense of like, oh yeah, you can do a lot of your own research. And it was a terrifying book in the sense of like, ooh, do we question people too much that now we're not even going to get a good product or a good service out into the market because everybody questions the expert? It was really interesting. And, you know, he sent the book to me for one reason. I ended up really loving it for another reason, but it was an interesting thought of like, can we now do too much research? And can there be influencers online who are just uneducated morons where they're taking away from what should be the gravitas of like a real expert in a subject? And I don't know how to square that in my head of whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, yeah, the expert has lost, you know, I'm not going to bring up any names, but shout out to all the experts who blew it, you know,
right.
for them, who ruined all the trust for everybody. But there
may be a few people that work for the CDC and the WHO who may have ruined it for
there are a few individuals,
a lot of good intentioned people.
Others, yeah, in that regard. And what happens though is now you swing so far the other way that I see these things on Instagram where people are making they're just giving advice, and it's not based in anything other than what they think people should do, whether it's nutrition advice or relationship advice or dating advice or finance. They're just spewing shit out of just whatever they want to say.
Yeah.
And the challenge is because if they can create a bad guy with it, then all of a sudden they can get people on their side, and they can kind of, there's this kind of dark side to the parasocial relationship too, because when you don't use that power for good, you can lead those people astray, right? I mean, look at like the crypto market, right? Or that, the FTX thing, all that stuff that happened because, Tom Brady was out there saying, go, this is legit. And all of a sudden, you see what happens there. And so I think that the challenge, there's a lot of responsibility in kind of what we do, in being able to put out content, because, if we don't, then I don't think that people will be able to have faith or trust in quote unquote experts.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? I think there is a division here. You bring up the Tom Brady thing. It's like, okay, if I want to learn how to throw a 10-yard like out pass, okay, yeah, Tom Brady's my guy. If I want financial advice, Tom Brady, not my guy. Like, you lost a lot of money in a crypto scam. You lost your wife to a jiu-jitsu coach who everybody with half a brain could tell that Giselle was going to leave you pretty quickly once she starts rolling around with a hot Brazilian dude on the mat 3 hours a day. Like, I'm not taking life advice from Tom Brady. And the funny thing is, when I hear people criticize, and we'll just continue on the Joe Rogan example, like, oh yeah, Joe Rogan, he's just this meathead, UFC commentator. Why would you trust him? It's like, well, I don't really trust him on his opinion. I trust him to interview people with respect, to pull out the opinion of other experts, right? Like if I want to know about, AI engineering, Lex Friedman, probably going to tune in and hear what he has to say. But his real superpower is he now has access to all of a sudden interview Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, high profile politicians and whatnot. And it's like, that to me is the beauty. And I think some people confuse the two, where it's like, yeah, I'm not going to listen to the 23-year-old life coach. I won't listen to the 23-year-old life coach either. But if the 23-year-old life coach can interview some experts and draw great information out of them, that's what I think the beauty of like a long form podcast is.
Yeah. When you talk about what are the things that we go over with our clients, one of the things that we kind of think through are these archetypes, right? And I don't know how much you've gotten into storytelling, but I think actually at the mastermind that we were at, we talked about the hero's journey. I think someone came in and talked about that. But within podcasting, or really within kind of storytelling, there's these archetypes, and one of them being the expert, the other one being like a journalist. Right. And that's kind of what you're talking about, that if that 23-year-old isn't coming in saying they have the answers, but if they're coming in saying, I'm going to find the answers for you and help you find them, then all of a sudden it gives that, it gives it space there. But that's different than that 23-year-old coming in and going, I have all the answers. Right. This is the way to do it. And so I think that people just have to kind of make decisions, and some people are more clear on what kind of role they're playing. Some people play both, but I think that's kind of what you get into in those situations.
Yeah. So when you're talking to people that are, I'm guessing it's mostly business owners who you're doing podcasts for.
Correct.
So when you're talking to them, like let's say there's some guy, he's in an industry, we'll just use a realtor, right? A good friend of mine who, we had him on the podcast, and he and I had become really close, actually, business-wise. His name's Joe Benavides, former UFC fighter, lightweight, just a total badass. I don't know. I think his 3 losses were like all in championship fights. Really awesome dude. Well, he's transitioned because one of the things that's really saved his life is when he was making money in the UFC, he and his wife were smart enough to invest into real estate. And so he's super passionate about working with young fighters and young athletes to, hey man, you get a fight of the night, you get $50,000. Don't go blow it on a Rolex and a new car. Buy an investment property so that at 34, when your body gives out on you, you can't fight anymore, you can't play tennis anymore, you can't play basketball anymore. You've got 6 rental properties spinning off positive cash flow. Super passionate about that. If you were advising him to start a podcast, what kind of things would you be talking to him about, right? Because he's obviously got, he's got a big social media following. His wife has a big social media following, but he's passionate about real estate and building wealth through real estate. Like, pretend he's a client of yours or a potential client of yours. What would you be telling him?
Well, I think I'll shout out to our other friend, Lawrence Dunning. Similar to what he's done is he's created a show around his interests, which are real estate investing, MMA and jiu-jitsu. And he, instead of, one strategy, if you will, one path is to be super niched and super narrow and to be, just the real estate kind of guy. And if it was just I don't want to say a regular real estate agent, but if it was a real estate agent without the past and experience of someone like Joseph Benavidez, I would probably say let's stick to real estate and let's stick to real estate investing and let's kind of take that expert path, if you will. But for him, he's probably got more of an opportunity for people to get to know who he is, because most people only see him as the fighter, and obviously he's a badass and he's a killer there, but to be able to do that with his wife and that sort of stuff, there's a different level of intelligence and a different level of there's more depth there that you can really start to see in a podcast. And so I would try and help him figure out, well, what are the topics that he's really into. I would imagine MMA or fighting or whatever it is.
Ironically, right now, not MMA. Right now, it's pickleball.
Okay, so there it is, right?
He's got super competitive at pickleball because he's like, I can't get back on the jiu-jitsu mat. I can't get back on the wrestling mat. I did that as a living for too long. He's like, I'll get back into it one day, but for now, I just want some distance from it. I'm like, so what do you do for like physical fitness? He's like, bro, I'm out there getting my ass kicked every day by the old guys at fucking pickleball.
There you go.
I'm like, how funny is that?
Well, see, the unique thing about that is it's going to be, it doesn't need to be a pickleball show. But if he talks pickleball, he's going to start to bring in an audience that resonates with it. And some people will be there for the pickleball stuff, and some people will be there for the investing stuff. And as long as you're authentic, and very much in the way that this show is kind of played out organically, it's just been about what someone is interested in. And that's the path that we like to take with someone who's got the depth of experience to share that hasn't been shared, yet. There's a lot of times where we're working with a CEO who's kind of coming from behind the curtain, and their past and their experience and their interests aren't as important as their knowledge and maybe their experience within the business and that sort of stuff. So we tend to focus it there. But that's kind of how we would approach it.
And, when you're talking to that CEO, which I know you've done, you're talking to that coach who has access to CEOs. You're talking to somebody like me, right? Where it's like, I know 100%, especially with COVID, where I started to be more vocal because I was living in LA. I was not happy at all at the lockdowns. Like I kind of give, when was COVID? Beginning of 2020. I kind of give everybody a pass until like July of 2020. I'm like, okay, yeah, everybody was just doing what they thought was right with limited amount of information. After like July of 2020, when we knew, hey man, this really affects elderly people. Kids do not die from COVID, period. End of story. Like the fact that they were still doing school shutdowns and stuff, I was pretty vocal about that. And I know I alienated a lot of my like realtors and referral sources who tend to be in LA, more far left, more progressive. And I tend to be far right libertarian. So it's like, to me, I know being vocal about my stuff has cost me relationships, right? Maybe we'll go into the Instagram example we were talking about when we were having lunch. But how much do you recommend people really share of themselves, right? Because if it's Joseph, who cares, right? Like he knows his market, his market of where he's going to make money is other fighters that need to buy real estate. He's probably not worried about pissing somebody off if he says something wrong. But if you're the CEO of a company, all of a sudden you have a responsibility to that company, to the shareholders, to your employees. And like really frustrating somebody or saying something that doesn't land with them correctly could cost you business relationships, whatnot. So if you're talking to somebody who's doing a little bit more of a business centric podcast, like how much of themselves do you recommend they bring to the show?
Sans you, I would say, like, can we avoid it? But if I know someone's like you, where they're it's going to be inauthentic to avoid, to not. Now, if this show was, I mean, maybe it is a consolidated coaching show. Well, then maybe that's not the place, right? It's like it's time and place sort of thing,
right?
So that's what I would recommend. But I think there's so much to authenticity, and because people are going to be sitting with you for sometimes hours. I mean, they can smell through that, and the moment it becomes inauthentic, people don't want to be around that. And that's really, I think, at a whether it's a conscious or subconscious level, people are drawn to that ability for people to be authentic in the conversation, because I just think they don't see that very often, or that's not very prevalent.
Yeah. Maybe you could look this up since you've got the internet over there. But recently there was this debate on Lex Fridman's show between Ben Shapiro and I can't remember the other guy's name. Who was it? Destiny. Like pretty far left commentator, podcaster. Like there's probably 90% of political issues that Destiny I would agree with, right?
The guy with blue hair.
Sometimes, yeah. But Destiny was so authentic in his debate with Ben Shapiro, and I definitely don't agree with everything Ben Shapiro says either, that I'm like, oh man, I got to subscribe to this guy's channel. I got to listen to him. Like if I want to get a hot take on multiple sides of the issue, I'll now go to his YouTube channel because he's super authentic. Like that won me over. Like he's a progressive, I'm a libertarian. I watch his shit all the time because I'm like, he's smart, he's intelligent, he presents things in a fair manner, and he's really authentic. I don't feel like he's just saying all the things you're supposed to say for clickbait to get like the blue hair mob to watch his videos. Like I just love him. I love the guy. And so I hope there is a space to win people over authentically and like just skip the headline. Unfortunately, because of the echo chambers that we all live in, I don't think I would have ever found him if he wasn't debating a conservative on like a libertarian podcast.
Yeah, that's another thing about podcasts is that it's with algorithms and with the short form stuff, you get fed the same stuff. I mean, you get fed it.
Right.
You know, it's not, I mean, there was a time where I really had to like question whether or not, like I had to delete Instagram for a while off my phone, and I don't have TikTok. And, but because when you swipe, you don't know what the next video is going to be about. You have no fucking clue. And so it could send you into a cascade, you know, you could be some graphic shit. It could be some triggering. I mean, like who knows, right? But on the other side, podcasts is more of a thing that you have to go out and search for. You know, you have to go out and actively decide to listen to it. And so I think it creates this unique space where there's the chance to get out of the echo chamber. Because the algorithms really create that echo chamber where they just, they're into that. Let me just keep feeding them because that's all that we know that they like that stuff. Whereas with a podcast and you have someone like Lex and Destiny where it's two, you know, you have the people who are into Lex and you have the people who are into Destiny. Now they're forced to hear each other's sides in a drawn out manner as opposed to 60 seconds hearing one side spit at the other side and then not hearing, you know, and just thinking that the other side is shit. Or whatever, right. You know, it's a dual kind of, it's a conversation, not a dictation.
Yeah. You know, speaking of our friend, Mr. Coach Drink On, which I love the fact that his last name is Drink On because he's like the most straight arrow guy, like super nice, always thinking. Like the fact that his name would be synonymous with like binge drinking just cracks me up. Anyway, you know, he does like almost every morning, like a little coach's corner coaching tip where it's like a solo cast, right? And he's just like, he's educating or he's talking about his thoughts or he's taking a topic and like going deeper. And then of course his show is interview format. So can you talk a little bit about like the different places for different show formats of like, you know, I did when we started this, a solo cast often where I would just, these are 3 issues I want to rant on. I love sitting here with you and having a cigar and like being social and not having to worry about what's going on with my phone and just talking for 2 hours to somebody. And then what we're going to try to experiment with here soon is like maybe 5 or 6 people around a table, you know, watching a boxing match or watching an MMA fight or watching a debate and commentating on it. So like, can you talk about kind of the different show formats and what you like for different reasons?
Yeah. So if you're a business owner, it's great to be able to hop on for 15 minutes. You know, I'd say 15 minutes max per episode, and just to deliver on a subject, right? If you're a loan officer and there's a new something that people need to know about, or there's a common question that you've got to that you can get often, that's great opportunities to hop on just to you know, rant or educate or whatever it is. Because what too many podcasters do is they have a conversation, or they think, interviews is what they see and what they know. So let me hop on and interview people. And they think that it's going to help them grow their business. And it might through the networking and through some of the other connections and such. But it actually, if done the wrong way, if you take like that journalist approach that we talked about, they're not looking to the journalists. They don't want to pay a journalist.
Right.
Like that journalist is not an expert. So they're not, if you come in and you are asking questions in a journalistic manner, you're kind of, I don't want to say demeaning, but you're lowering your sales equity, right?
Yeah.
Just by the
different
way
role.
It's a different role. And so if someone wants to now, so if you want to have conversations, the way that you do it is you don't have an interview, you have a conversation. That way everybody's coming in on a level playing field, and it's two thought leaders, two experts who are having a conversation about something, as opposed to, let me ask you this question, let me ask you this thing. And you know, whereas some hosts will have their 10 questions or their 5 questions, and they just, you know, read them right off the thing, and they don't get any sales equity from their listeners for that. So conversations and interviews are great for that relationship aspect. They're great for diversity of topics. They're great for connections and networking and that sort of stuff to kind of bring, you know, other audiences in, because when you have, you know, Joseph Benavides on the show, you know, some people who are into him and what he's up to, they're going to click on, and some will stick around, and it kind of goes on like that. So after that, you know, we don't really deal in like the really cinematic sort of stuff. You know, they've got really cool shit like in sci-fi, and you know, our producer Kevin, he has a really cool true crime show. It's like really cinematic and sound effects and all that sort of shit. And it's just, so there's those sorts of things. So outside of the cinematic stuff, you've really got, you know, a couple of ways that you can go. You've got your interviews or you've got your solo. And that's kind of it. You know, we like to break those up, and there's different ways that you can create segments on it. We've got the cigars here. Some people have the hot wings. Some people have got the different things. But I mean, after that, like, most people just want to have a good conversation. They want to listen to like a good conversation. Like, that's what people are there for podcasts for, is to hear a good conversation. Most people are listening in their car or on their drive or working out or doing the dishes, and it's kind of something to take them out of wherever they're at. So, you know, when it comes to formats, as I'm thinking about it, we like to break our stuff into like 3 segments, you know, kind of like a radio show might. You know, you've got kind of an intro, a main, and an out, and that allows you to do some things with sponsors and ads, and you know, allows you to do some different cool or different segments, right? Whether it's asking the same types of questions, or whether it's you know, doing a bonus round or a current events segment. Like having it segmentized has been helpful in just keeping the show engaging.
So talk a little bit about segments, right? Like, the only thing we do is there's 2 questions that I always end the show with, and that kind of just started by accident. But if you were coaching me, right? Because this year, 2024, we're trying to have our podcast, like, because money is tight in the mortgage business, it's like all the things have to support the thing, right? So I'm interviewing more business owners, realtors, loan officers. Like, I want to grow the audience. And I was actually talking to, I wouldn't call him a friend yet, an associate or an acquaintance. He runs a podcast, Jiu-Jitsu, awesome jiu-jitsu guy, has a wildly successful tutorial business, really well subscribed podcast on jiu-jitsu. And I was talking to him, and I was like, yeah, man, like we talked almost this whole week at this jiu-jitsu camp. He's a super cool guy, super transparent, told me all the things he did wrong, all the things he did well, shared with me a bunch of his numbers, which were kind of mind-boggling. And he goes, yeah, he's like, you kind of did it backwards, where you should have started with like a loan officer business podcast and then expanded more into your personal stuff. And yeah, after you got your first 10, 20,000 subscribers because they like the loan officer, the real estate content, as soon as you started talking about the libertarian stuff, you'll lose half your audience, but at least you go from 20,000 to 10,000. He's like, what you've tried to do is, like, because it was just a passion project, start with a variety show. And now you're shifting more into business so that you will feel authentic sending this out to your, 15,000 person realtor and loan officer list. He's like, but you're kind of swimming against the tide because you've already established that you're willing to talk to cross-dressers and OnlyFans girls and, people that are super opinionated in the politics. So if you were giving me advice, like at the beginning of the show, what kind of segments would you recommend, like, building out to say, hey, we need to be able to break this up eventually for sponsors. We need to be able to pull out different chunks of the show. What are some segments for somebody that's starting a business podcast that you would recommend?
Well, I always like current events. Current events is always an easy thing because you've got, we do three main segments of the show. The first segment is usually good to, we call it like the banter section. That it's good to warm up the audience. That's a great place to catch up on personal stuff. That's a great place to talk about whatever is outside of the main segment, right? But then we go to some music and kind of like how sitcoms, they used to have that opening segment, and then they would set up the episode, cut to the intro, and then go to commercial. We like to do something similar, so get the audience ready, and then you have your main kind of topic or whatever, right? That last sort of segment, we like the easy ones are current events, tech, or like tools, like those sorts of things. In alignment with like current events, I'm thinking about like if someone is a mortgage officer and they've got, new programs are available, or, anything that's kind of reoccurring but changes, that might be helpful to
guideline updates, ways to get people into a house, shit like that.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's, there's so much of that can go deep. And also I think that people should get comfortable in those sorts of spaces and with those sorts of shows, being comfortable talking about the same thing from like 100 different angles.
Yeah.
And it's like the same topic from this perspective, from that perspective, for, old people, for young people, for people, like all these different, if you cover that same topic from all these different angles, you can really obviously start to establish yourself as the person for that. And then simultaneously attract a wider audience because you're talking to more people.
Yeah. Like if I was just talking, I would actually do this as a guest segment. Like if I was just talking to loan officers, I've got a previous business partner that I worked with, and we went to separate companies. We went our separate ways. We're still good friends, and he's a great dude, Justin Bale. He's one of the few dudes where when I say to coaching clients, like, hey man, nobody really loves doing loans, like getting into the nitty gritty and memorizing the guidelines and working through tax returns. I'm like, nobody actually loves that. This is like a sales job. And then you have to go through the process of building the loan, except for Justin Bale. That guy really values being the smartest guy in the room. And he's the one who, like, when the press release comes out from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac about like new guideline changes, he's like the only one in the company that actually reads that shit. So when I get one of those, I'll call him. I'll be like, hey, Justin, what's this new thing on like multifamily houses? And he's like, oh, you got to worry about this. They went from 20% down to 5% down, but now you got to worry about this. You can't have a cosign. Like, he just nerds out on that shit. If he started a podcast tomorrow just for loan officers, where he just did that current event segment and talked about, hey man, here's all the changes you need to worry about. Here's the new investors that came to the market. Ooh, and here's the guideline that went away that you used to lean on to get loans approved. He'd have the #1 loan officer podcast in the country within 6 months because he's so freaking good at that stuff. I don't know if he would enjoy the banter as much, or like he's not going to have an edge on him because he's a lot more reserved than I am. But dude, you talk about like current events and that segment of education. If I was doing a loan, I would do the funny stuff on the loan officer stuff, the salesy stuff, the coaching stuff. And I'd be like, and now for like the real stuff, let's shoot it over to Justin Bale, So that's pretty interesting.
Well, I think not enough people are willing to honor their weird, if you will. Like they that's probably something that people made fun of him for. I'm sure if, I don't know, maybe he could, I definitely, he could speak this, but maybe he felt some type of way, right? Because, oh my goodness, I'm the only one doing this.
Right.
And so if he stopped because he thought about, he cared about what other people were thinking, well, then he doesn't have this, he's not this great resource. So I think that a lot of us have these things that we are drawn to, or we think are fascinating, or that are easy for us, that are hard for other people. Like, that's how we got into podcasting, because I was like, this is simple enough for me, but this seems confusing as shit for you. So yeah, if you want to pay me, I'll do like that sort of thing. But it was a willingness to, like, for a while, like I didn't really know podcasts, but it was something that I learned, and someone kept asking me for help. And so I was willing to kind of drill down into it. And I think you have to kind of do trial and error to figure out what people want. And then when you figure out what's resonating with people, to like double and triple and quadruple down on that. And that's what starts to create that sort of, I don't want to say notoriety, but that his name is Jeff Hoffman. I think if you remember Jeff Hoffman, he talked about a parking spot. His thing was like, in terms of branding and differentiation. He talked about, there's all these different things, and you can have a parking spot, which is different from all the other companies. So what is your parking? Where do you fit in this parking lot? And then once you identified what your spot is, making sure everybody knows it, that's who you are. And I don't think that's two steps to that, right? People have to figure out what their spot is, and then they have to tell people about it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's brilliant. So, going along that segment idea, getting somebody who's really got their finger on the pulse of podcasting and marketing thyself. We're recording this in March of 2024. This will come out like Q2 of 2024. So, looking into your crystal ball 3 months, 6 months, a year out, what are the current event things that are happening right now in podcasting, or specifically moving podcast content over to social media? Like, what are some of the current events that you're seeing that like, oh yeah, I'm bringing this value to my client and I'm like 3, 6, 12 months ahead of the curve because like I'm reading the tea leaves and I'm reading the current events. And I'm like, it's one of the reasons I love watching Gary Vee, because he's like, oh, this shit's not working anymore. I'm pivoting to this. Or like, he was talking the other day of like on Instagram, a standard picture that you swipe over to a video. He's like, I don't know why that's landing. Like, I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have thought to lead with the video, but like the picture, people can't help but swipe right when they see the little dots that there's something else. And then they kind of get forced into watching my video. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty brilliant. And he's just doing it through trial and error. So if you were talking about current events in the podcasting and marketing space, or, the crystal ball of something that you think is going to blow up next, where are Hector's thoughts on current events in podcasting?
Well, the headlines are that everybody's getting fired right now. So like Spotify, they had massive layoffs. Malcolm Gladwell, I just read an article that was dragging him because his podcast company is laying off a bunch of people. I mean, over the last really 2 years, and I was a part of that early on. I mean, there was a network that, we got laid off. And so it's like, I've kind of seen that and experienced that firsthand, but also I think that it's more of a correction than anything. There was like
a correction in the overall podcasting market,
in the podcasting space. Yeah. There was a ton of money and a ton of investment, and it was way bloated. And these companies they hadn't figured out their model. Like their business model was just built on hopes and dreams and, making more Joe Rogans, but there's still only one Joe Rogan.
Right.
I think the next in line is like Huberman, right? And it's like, but there's not, they thought that we're going to throw all this money in and then there's going to be a bunch of them and we can, cash in on all the profits of all these things. And that just didn't pan out. With that being said though, I don't think that the podcast industry is going anywhere. I think that, more and more people are just like, more and more people are exposed to podcasts every day. I used to have to, when I would tell people like I have a podcast production company, you'd have to ask like, do you know what that is? And almost nobody over the age of 40 would say yes. I'd have to be like, oh, it's that thing on your phone and whatever. I'd explain.
Oh, they didn't know what a podcast was.
They didn't know what a podcast was, right? Oh. Yeah, like they just were it was foreign to them. And I'd say maybe 45 is probably the differentiator. But that was, a few years ago, I had to explain it. Now, everybody I talk to, when I tell them about what a podcast is, do you know what a podcast is? They're like, oh yeah, I know. They have some sort of association with it. It's getting put in cars. They're already on all the systems in the cars. And so it's like the access to them is only going to get easier. So I don't think that it's going away. I just think that people have to figure out what the business model is. That they have to have a business model going in, and that the business model can't be the show, in the same way that, when someone like, even like these Netflix, shows or series or whatever, like any type of media, there's some sort of business model that drives it. It's not that they just go and create this media, this art, and then all of a sudden people give them money. Like, I don't think that they really thought that through. And so if you've got a business, if you've got something that can actually drive revenue, then it makes more and more sense to have a podcast, because just like people, years ago, everybody needed a website and then everybody kind of needed to be on social media. I don't think that everybody needs a podcast, but there's going to be so many more that are starting that if you don't have something to differentiate yourself or to create that, to at least establish that parasocial relationship, then your competitors are going to do it. And they're going to be able to take that along with all of the benefits that come with actually having a media platform as well. Because you can drive revenue, it can drive to your business, but there's also other benefits of it, whether it's connections or it can be its own property, IP, the whole sorts of things. So.
Yeah. One of the things that we're looking to do, and I think I've talked about this strategy on the podcast before, is that, we want to have a bunch of business episodes, right? So that if somebody looks us up, it doesn't immediately go to the gal I interviewed from OnlyFans. So I want to have more business centric stuff up, and then we're going to rework like the pinned videos on YouTube and whatnot. And probably about the middle of this year, I want to use that slight rebrand of the podcast to be able to call estate attorneys, divorce attorneys, financial planners, and be like, hey man, can we get you on the podcast to talk about your angle? Because more and more, I'm doing more consumer direct stuff because I have a big enough database of past loan officer clients. And I think realtors are in a real weird spot right now where a lot of the ones that were successful aren't successful anymore just because there's fewer and fewer transactions. And I have found the referral from a divorce attorney, a financial planner, a tax professional, that's almost signed, sealed, and delivered. Whereas when I get referred from a realtor, it's like, well, here's 3 loan officers you can call. And then that creates this race to the bottom of just shopping for rate. I don't get to do any of the other stuff that John Israel talks about the education and the being the advocate, because it's like, well, I'm talking to 17 people who's got the best rate. And it's like, okay, that's fair. We are a commodity. I get it. So yeah, that's one of our thoughts is like, hey, how can we shift a little bit so then I can start talking about current events with financial professionals, divorce attorneys, family attorneys, estate attorneys, stuff like that, so I can get referrals from them. And then even if 5 people watch the podcast, who cares? Because I was able to build that relationship over the course of the show and then call on them for referrals in the future. So that's kind of what we're looking at. When you talk about the tech and the tools, actually, before we move on to the tech and the tools, on the current event side, do these numbers still hold true? Like, I think I had read somewhere, and maybe this was some fake news, that like if a podcast, like most podcasts don't make it through past like the 7th or the 17th episode or something, or
I think over only 50% of podcasts make it to episode 8. So it's like half of them die out before episode 8.
Wow.
I believe 80 to 90% don't make it past 25. And then 50 is like, I think if you're in the top 1% of shows, if you at least in terms of number of episodes produced, you're in like the top, 99% of them don't make it past episode 50.
Wow. And do you have any idea like how many podcasts they were at the height of COVID when everybody was telling everybody they had to have a podcast, and where we're at now in 2024? I have to imagine a third or a half or 2/3 have fallen off.
Oh, way more.
Way more.
Way more. Yeah. I mean, because there's Kevin could probably quote these numbers a little better. There's something like
Kevin, unmute yourself. Give us some cool stats.
I don't have stats per se. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. I don't necessarily have the exact stats, but I watched it boom and bust.
Yeah.
And like, there's like, it's something like 2.5 million podcasts.
That's what I was going to say.
Are like out there, right? Like you could go on like Listen Notes and just like Google podcast names, but they haven't put out episodes for 2, 3, 4 years.
I think it's like something like 200,000 are active within the last year.
It's like a ridiculous amount that have just gone to the wayside. But again, goes back to your point in the conversation where COVID is over. People don't have the time to sit and talk for 3 hours. And the other thing, as you guys were talking about the 7-episode mark, it's like everybody's got that Joe Rogan mindset, but then it's, oh shit, I have to edit. I have to do there's video. Oh shit, there's social media. Like there's all these time intensive things that people have to do every week if they want to cultivate an audience and build that brand of their podcast, not even for a business, but just a brand of their podcast, that they burn out because there is no return on investment for years. That goes YouTube and podcasting, right? Most big podcasters, you're looking at 5 to 7 years before they even begin to make money on YouTube. Right?
Yeah. I mean, that Diary of CEO one, like, which is like the hit for everybody right now, and it's been around like 9 years.
Wait, which one is this?
Diary of a CEO.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
No, I haven't. This hasn't even come across my radar.
You've probably seen a lot of.
I'm going to subscribe to it now. Yeah, Diary of a CEO.
Diary of a CEO. I think he's from the UK. But it's like the trend, and everybody that comes to us, they all say like, "Hey, can you make it look like this? Can you make us look like Diary of a CEO?" And thankfully, Kevin is skilled enough to do that. But
I have seen this guy.
But he's been around. He's been doing episodes for like 9 years, and he just caught fire like in the last year or two.
Yeah.
And people want to point to that and not point to the first 7 years.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the typical, like, it took me 10 years to become an overnight success, right?
Right.
Yeah. I remember listening to Joe Rogan's podcast 8 years ago or something, just because there was an MMA fighter on there that like you had no access to. They weren't, you know, people weren't sharing their entire life on Instagram. And I'm like, oh, you know, if it was today, I'd be like, oh, this guy Sean Strickland says some really wild shit in his post interview. I want to know more about him. Is he crazy? Is he just playing a WWF character? But now you can just go back and see his whole evolution over Instagram, podcasts, whatnot. And he is a psycho, no doubt about it. But it's like, at least you know he's a psycho, right? You have access to that. Cool. So that's like current event segment. Tell us about like the tech tools. Like, the thing that Chris hates doing the most is what, you know, he sits in here and watches the podcast live. Then he watches it again to like edit it, you know, make it look good for the long form. And then he's like, if I really want to do it right, I got to go through and I got to watch it a third time to get the clips and the timestamps and all that stuff. Now with tools like we've been using Opus AI, and it's not perfect, but it gives them a pretty nice cross-section of like 30 videos where he's like, okay, if they didn't quite nail this 55-second clip, I can go back to the main source and, you know, splice it up correctly. So can you talk about some of the tools that are making life easier for podcasters or people like you who produce the podcast?
Yeah, our one of the tools that we use the most is a tool called Descript. And I think it's really groundbreaking actually for not only for podcasts, but really editing any kind of content, because what it allows you to do is it allows you to edit an audio or a video like you would a Word document. And so it transcribes all of the text. And so you can watch the video and then right along to the left of it, it's playing the transcript. And so you can actually see all the words. And so you can jump ahead or scoot ahead or Control F or whatever it is. And so it creates a much more, a much different experience than just editing a waveform or, you know, looking at these little jagged lines and trying to edit that. So I think it made it a lot more accessible. And then what they've also done is they've integrated AI into that sort of thing. So what you can do is you can ask it for the best segments or what are the best clips or where do they talk about this sort of topic. And so you can kind of integrate AI into your content to help pull out some of those highlights and some of those nuggets so that it's similar to what Opus AI does. And then we use it to kind of write our show notes and get a lot of those started. And you know, we, at one point, we were paying a show note writer probably close to like $4,000 a month to write show notes for 3 different shows, because she would do exactly what Chris would do. And she would listen to it a couple of times, pull out all the links, write a great, you know, summary and blog posts, and it was like she was fucking fantastic at it. The challenge for her is that ChatGPT and AI can do that for $20 a month, and so you know, much more. And so that's what we that's probably the one that we use the most, is Descript. And then there's
so like, could I go into Descript and say, hey, I had this 3-hour episode, give me all the segments where I used the word libertarian, or I said Joe Rogan, or I said technology or whatever, and then it'll give me those timestamps.
Right.
Man, that's pretty sick. We might have to look into that. What other type of tech are you seeing on the horizon? And is anybody going to have a job in 10 years? Because of the AI tools, are they getting that good?
You know, audio is interesting because specifically audio is like Kevin does some wizardry. I don't know what he does, but I think what that sort of thing requires a little bit of a nuance and an ear, and there's some human element that's still involved in that. Well, is the AI eventually going to catch up? Perhaps, but at least right now, it's not at the place where you can just click a button and, you know, you pull out all the dogs barking in the background, and you pull out like, so it's still, that's going to come though. And I think there will be a time where people can just click a button and get their audio edited, which is kind of nice. The other side of it is like AI generative voices have become really easy to do. And so you actually might have sent a video like this, or maybe you've seen it in one of the Front Row Dads threads, but you can basically just type a paragraph, and certain programs will, it'll record you and kind of put a model together, and then you record your voice and you just type the paragraph, and it'll basically create a video for you of you talking and you recording it. Your mouth's moving, your eyes are moving. It's your kind of AI generated voice, and all you had to do is write it. So, thinking about for realtors or thinking about for whatever, for loan officers, all of a sudden the ability to create personalized videos, gets really, really easy, and scalable as well. And the quality is eerie. It's like really good, like for the most part.
Is it so scary where, who's the podcaster? He's British. He was like on the Bachelor show and he's just super blown up. He's getting a ton of interviews now. He's in Austin. Chris Andrews or Chris
Wilkinson or something.
Yeah.
Like
yeah. I think his podcast is great. Cause the
one with Modern Wisdom.
Yeah. Modern Wisdom. Thank you. Yeah. Modern Wisdom podcast. So is it good enough to where like I could get interviewed by him and it would be all fake? It would be like his face, his voice. I just type in the questions. He would be like interviewing me.
You haven't seen some of those videos? There's some Joe Rogan videos where it's Joe Rogan talking, and I'm like, there's no way he fucking said this.
He did not endorse this product.
Like, there's no way he fucking said that. This is way too like. He doesn't talk about this shit, or like, yeah, it's a product that he's endorsing, and you read the comments and it's like the ones who are like listened to enough of Joe, they're like, this is bullshit. This is but to someone who hasn't listened to hundreds of his episodes, they wouldn't be able to tell. They wouldn't be able to tell at all.
It's kind of scary, right?
It's fucking way scary.
Because like somebody could take, I've probably got now at this point between coaching content, this pod, I've got thousands of hours of like open content out on the internet. Somebody could just take my likeness, my voice, and they could produce a terrifying like string of comments that are just not me, and most people wouldn't be able to tell.
Nope, they would not. Yeah, that's you've heard about like scammers doing this.
Yeah,
right, where they basically clone someone's voice and stuff, and then they call their relative and demanding money or like saying that they're kidnapped or whatever, and it's all an AI generated voice.
I heard this terrifying story like that where like some lady gets a call and it's her daughter saying, hey, I've been kidnapped. I need you to wire this much money. And it turns out the daughter was just at school. She was totally fine, but she had so much like TikTok video content that some scammer was able to duplicate her voice, duplicate her like everything, right? Like her incantation and the mom thought it was really her daughter.
Yeah. So now that we have to have like, safe words or whatever,
Oh, I'm going to have to teach some to my kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Panda. No, just kidding. That's not going to be a safe word. That's not it now. But yeah.
Now if they say panda, it's not dad.
Yeah. Like if we get to a point where it's like you can't trust your own eyes, dude. I mean, it's pretty scary.
We're just about there. Yeah, we're just about there.
I mean, look at all the Taylor Swift controversy that over the uproar of the AI pictures. Obviously, it wasn't her, but they generated her face onto a woman posing provocatively with the Kansas City Chiefs fans. And like literally it went like nuclear, like viral.
Wow.
And like companies got in trouble like for putting that kind of shit out there. But like we are on the precipice of
even for video,
right?
Like there's OpenAI just announced. I think is it called Sora?
It's like Sora or Sora.
I don't like that. It's so close to Soros. That's kind of creepy. Cool. But anyways, it's the same thing that you could do with ChatGPT or with the pictures where I want an old man walking across the street in Thailand in 1964, and it's like boom, like there it is. And what is his name? The really Tyler Perry. He was building out an 800. You know, sorry. Mm-hmm. He was building out an $800 million studio complex at his in Georgia for his new studios, and he put all that on hold. He's like, we don't need any of this. We can do it all with AI. And so they canned that whole $800 million expansion. He's like, we're not doing anything until we see like where this is going, because we're not going to make this investment and then we can do this thing for $20. Because he's like, literally, we used to have to go to the mountains. We used to have to go to, Serbia or all these different places. He's like, I can type it in there and boom, I'm there.
Wow. Yeah, because like green screens are scary enough, but you could always kind of tell there's that little filter behind somebody. It's not, green screen technology is not perfect. Right. And that's better than blue screen, which was before, so it's like, it's not perfect, but yeah, if you can just create the entire, ecosystem with just word prompts, simultaneously awesome and terrifying. Like I was thinking the other day about stock manipulation, right? Like how long before somebody comes up with an AI generated video of, a 747 Airbus crashing and Boeing stock goes through the toilet for 8 hours before they figure out it's all fake, right? Like if you had some catastrophic stuff go viral, I mean, you could talk about like hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars being lost in market cap for a company if AI I mean, I just can't even imagine the implications, right? Somebody has a fake AI generated video of them going through the Chick-fil-A drive-through and the Chick-fil-A representative saying something racist or something, right? And now all of a sudden Chick-fil-A stocks on a crash and it's like, oh no, it was just a hoax. All turned out to be fake. Like, I think we could be going to like a really, really scary place on that shit.
Wasn't there not within the last 6 months, there was that drug maker Lilly, they make the, insulin.
Okay.
And somebody had like photoshopped a press release saying that they were going to drop the price of their insulin down to like $7 or something like that. And their price tanked until Lilly like literally put out a press release and said, no, this is not true. And then it all went back up. Like we are
It's Nancy Pelosi shit.
Yeah. She's the best investor in the history of America. She puts Warren Buffett to shit. You know, I was just reading the other day, her publicly disclosed profile is up 90% in the last 14 months. I'm like, I wonder
Of course it is.
if only I also had access to legal insider trading. Oh, NVIDIA, or whatever the fuck it's called. You know, she's just like a massive investor in there right before they got a government contract. Wonder how that happened. Like, dude, the fact that Americans have not stepped up and been like, no, we need to pass a resolution or an amendment or something that politicians cannot profit off their insider information. Like, how is that a thing? It's just bonkers. Like if we did the stuff that people in Congress could get away with, we would be in jail. 100%.
Just like, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. I mean, perhaps that's just why we're living in this distraction, filled world. It's just there's so much shit they don't actually want us to pay attention to. Perhaps that even being the least of the things,
Yeah.
But one of them.
Yeah. Oh man.
There's a whole Reddit thread dedicated to Nancy Pelosi.
Oh yeah.
Her trading, like
there's a mutual fund you can buy now that just
follows
the investments of congressmen, and it's like this hedge fund guy. I follow his Instagram, and he's like, just to be clear, I am not an analyst. I am not a quant. I don't do any research. All my venture capital fund or his mutual fund does, he started with some hedge fund money. All we do is we try to mirror the trades of congressmen. And he's fucking killing it, dude. I think the market's up like 12%. He's up like 28% because, sometimes there's a lag on those disclosures and stuff. But it's like, that should not be a thing. Like, how is this even controversial? Shouldn't be partisan. Shouldn't be an argument. It's just like maybe Congress should have to live by the same financial rules that put, I don't know, Martha Stewart in jail, for Christ's sake.
I don't know. It baffles me what people get up in arms about and what they just decide that is not important. And it just seems so backwards sometimes that the things that actually matter, we don't give a shit about. And the things that don't matter at all, we can't come together on.
Yeah, totally. And the left and the right does it, right? It's like, whatever. I don't want men following my daughter into the bathroom. But if it's between having that argument and I'll take care of my own daughter's bathroom habits and Congress being able to cheat the financial system, I'm way more concerned about Congress cheating the financial system. It's just, oh God, it's crazy. All right. Sorry, we got off on a tangent there. Any other tech tools that people need to know about when they're thinking about podcasting?
No, what's nice about Descript is you can do a lot with Descript. And so if you just get started there, I feel like it'll open up a huge world. And then, I think you could really do a lot. And hopefully the team at Descript I'll send them a PO or an invoice for this.
Perfect. And then, how much, because I think about this, like things are moving so fast, right? From Chat GPT to Chat GPT 2, 3, 4. Now it's Dolly where you can make pictures. And this is funny. I love wearing like weird, colorful rash guards. And the 6 a.m. class at our gym is very like, it's old dudes. It's the worker bees and whatnot. And all of the competitors and the tough guys go to the 6 p.m. class, right? So you go to the 6 a.m. class and it's like tie-dye and donut rash guards and shit like that. And you go to the 6 p.m. class and it's like level black. We're competitors. We're out to kill. And so I was joking around with the head coach Andy Varela, shout out to like easily top 10 in his weight class in the world. He's like, bro, why you always wear that shit, man? Like, we're trying to like create an environment of toughness. I'm like, bro, I just want to become a black belt. So like you have to stand next to me and I've got a donut rash guard on. Right. And so I went on ChatGPT and I described what Andy Varela looks like. I'm like, Hispanic male, muscular, high and tight haircut, blah, 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 blah. And I just kept tinkering with it till he gave me a picture that looked pretty close to him. And then I was like, now put him in a donut rash guard. And then I sent it to him. I'm like, bro, see, you even look tough in like a donut rash guard. He's like, fuck you, man. That's pretty funny. So that's like the fun side of it. But how much of your time and Kevin's time and whatnot is just spent like, you know, you probably got to put in 100 hours every time one of these new tech tools comes out so you can stay ahead of the marketplace and like add value for what you guys charge. Like, obviously you got to get the work done and you got to produce the podcast, but how much of your time is just sitting around tinkering with new technology to see if it can add business to your value and like my podcast?
Probably too much. I've had to there was a time where I had to slow down on ChatGPT because there was no real business use case other than just trying to experiment and figure out what other shit I could do with it, you know?
Right.
But yeah, it's necessary. And the nice thing about it is that most of these tools are, once you learn how to use them, it's like being able to use a machine at the gym. You know, it's like you walk into the gym and like, all right, you generally know, like, here's the fucking pads, here's the, I lift this way. Like, yeah, there's different brands and like different sorts of things, but generally you know how to do it. And it's kind of the same thing with most of these AI tools. A lot of them have different outputs, whether they're putting out pictures or text or whatever it is. But generally, like, once you kind of understand how they work, like from a top down perspective, and then you on the other hand, like, start to figure out, I think a big learning part of the process is figuring out what's even possible. Like, you sit there, like, so much of the conversations I had early on with people was like, well, what could I do with it? And it was like, well, okay, well, what are you like? Let me just tell me about your day, and we'll find something that you can do it. Whether it's nutrition plans or shopping lists or fucking kids activities or, you know, loan officer emails or whatever. You know, I can't tell you how many times, you know, we're writing up an agreement. You know, I wouldn't call it a contract, but, you know, some sort of written agreement. And I'm in ChatGPT, and it's so much better and quicker than I ever could have been.
Right.
And so just testing and playing out with that stuff, but it's a lot. The nice thing is that most of the time, though, they're simple enough that they use natural language. So if you can just articulate what it is that you want to some of these things, yeah, a lot of times they'll give you back something. You know, sometimes it might be, you might have to, like you said, massage it a couple of times to get it exactly what you want.
Right.
But generally, they respond in uncanny sort of ways. You know.
Yeah, it's funny because I needed to come up with a terms and condition. Like, I think our mortgage coaching business, we're probably the only mortgage coaching business that doesn't force people to sign a contract. So the good news is it gives people an incentive to give us a look. The bad side is like, I get a fair amount of people where we go through the whole onboarding process. We send them a swag package, you know, we do everything. And like 60 days in, either they're not showing up for the coaching. Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's like the coaching material is not right for them. But a lot of times it's just they're not showing up. They were never going to be committed. And so we would get cancellations at like 4:45 on the 30th, and their bill's supposed to come out on the 1st. And I'm like, no, we cannot have this because then it creates a customer service issue. They're pissed. I'm pissed. So I went to ChatGPT and I specifically said, here's our business. Here's a sample terms and conditions. We want to be generous, but poignant. And then I gave it a couple more prompts where at one point I was like, I want to get to the point, but I don't want to be a dick. I put that in like the prompt, and it gave me like this beautiful 2-page terms and conditions that now gets emailed out with all of our onboarding process. It's, you know, pinned in our Facebook group. It's pinned in our Telegram group. So there's just no excuse anymore for a client being like, oh, I didn't know, man. It's 11:59. You guys are going to charge me in a minute. I need to offboard. It's like, well, I wasn't awake at 11:59 waiting for your customer service request. But, you know, my fear about nobody having a job is like 2 years ago, that would have been something I sent to my lawyer, and he made $1,200 for coming up with a terms and condition that he probably cut and pasted over here. My lawyer knows me pretty well, so he would have rewrote it a little bit more for like my language. And like, my lawyer's out $1,200 because I pay ChatGPT $20 a month. So back to my question, is anybody going to have a job in 10 years?
The ones who are using AI. Yeah, I'm always something that has stuck with me for, I go back to it a lot throughout my life, is the whole, you know, in a gold rush, be the ones handing out shovels.
Right.
Like that sort of whatever that saying is. And so for me, that's always been the thing is that like, how do we learn how to use it? And for me, I'm always like, how do we learn how to use it? And how do we learn how to provide it for people? Because there's going to be so many people who don't need it. And I think there's going to be a huge reckoning with jobs, you know, and especially what's interesting is that they thought that the creative jobs and the white collar jobs were going to be
learn
safe.
to code movement.
Yeah. They thought that those things are going to be safe. And it's like, those ones are, like you said, lawyers we're not going to need them as much. Accountants, tax professionals, like all these sorts of things where the knowledge was the value that they brought. If someone is savvy enough to be able to use some of these AI tools, it's like it really eliminates them. And so then, you know, going back to that lady who used to write show notes for us, people are like, man, that's really tough for her. And yeah, it might suck for her because, you know, she's kind of being replaced. But in my head, if I were her, now she's able to scale her output. You know, she's able to, instead of just managing 3 shows, which probably took her, you know, a full-time sort of capacity, she could do kind of 30 shows. You know, it's going to be a little bit different of mechanically, but also that allows for her to do that. Like I don't think that we're not building skyscrapers with our hands. You know, we're using machines and tools, and I think that at a certain point that sort of tool goes from mechanical to intellectual, but it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah. And I was making a joke with a friend of mine the other day. I'm like, the future really favors the autistic. like if you can sit down, you know, we went from like a warlord society to an agrarian society to an industrial society. And now it's like, I don't know, maybe I can coin this term like the autistic society, because it's like, if you have that brain setting where you can sit down and obsess over something for hours and months and maybe even years, like you have such an advantage on the competition. Right? Oh, yeah. I was reading an article, maybe you even know who this guy is, and he started just like developing skins like 10 years ago for video games when video games first became interactive. He was like, oh, well, I'm playing Call of Duty and I want my guy to be wearing a tie-dye costume in the middle of World War II or whatever. So he started developing these skins, and now he has a multi-million-dollar business just doing plugins for Fortnite and, you know, whatever the new hot game of the year is. And I'm like, yes, and that's super cool. I would never have the mental bandwidth to sit there for the 10,000 hours needed with all the different games to learn, okay, so what's the hack for me to do this and enter this and write this code and do that and come up with this and then brand it and then market it and then sell somebody a $10,000 skin because there's only one of them so that everybody knows this dude playing Fortnite is rich. I'm like, this is the wildest shit. And it just favors those people that can sit down and focus on the same shit for tens of thousands of hours.
Yes, I don't disagree with that. But to our previous point, what's also nice is that if someone can say, hey, I want you to code an application that helps mortgage officers do blank or whatever, and they can articulate it enough to the ChatGPT, it'll write code. I mean, a lot of times it'll write code that can, you know, create real applications, you know? And so the things that were required to do that, you know, this whole skin thing, like it would be interesting. I'm sure that there are some ways to kind of utilize and leverage tools, but I think that necessity, I think the necessity to go as deep as what you're talking about is kind of going away because you can leverage some of these tools. But what's still required is the creativity to see how to put all the pieces together.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I think there's room for both, frankly.
Interesting. And then, you know, I also think about maybe the H&R Block scenario where it's like TurboTax, H&R Block, you know, comparatively speaking to 40 years ago, maybe 80% of people can file their taxes with TurboTax and pay $1, you know, to have it done. But the 20% of people that really need an intellectual CPA and a bookkeeper and stuff, you know, between my bookkeeping and my CPA and the multiple businesses and the LLC and wanting to write off this podcast without getting audited, you know, I'm paying like $10,000 a year for bookkeeping and tax services. And so it's like, yeah, there's a lot fewer people like me who need that service, but the ones who do, we're paying out the ass for it. Yeah. And I don't see a world where I want to sit down on ChatGPT and ask IRS code questions for 20 days prior to tax season to do my own shit. I'll just pay somebody to do it for me. So I wonder if it'll be like, you know, we're already in a place where the gap between rich and poor is getting wider and wider and wider, but I could see it really getting wide now that all of a sudden, like, okay, only 5% of the people in the nation need a tax preparer. But if you need a real tax preparer, you're going to pay $20,000 for that tax advice.
I could see that happening. Yeah. I think that's probably where we're going with most things, right? With as things get kind of commoditized and as things, go the way of this TurboTax sort of thing, I think a lot of industries are gonna go like that. I could even see like these service-based businesses are really they're going to be the ones that need to utilize AI, right? I mean, the need for services is not going to go away, and you're going to have the people that are going to pay this kind of subscription sort of thing, and then, but you're also going to have the need for the people to put the stuff together, right? What you're talking about, and the tax professional who's able to use and leverage AI. All of a sudden, it's much easier for them. There's much more margin for them. They can scale and fulfill with a lot more clients. So I think that there will be less jobs, but the people who use AI are going to be the ones who are able to keep them.
Crazy, man. A couple questions to close out here on. What's the question I forgot to ask? Like your width of knowledge is so much because not only are you doing the podcasting thing, but you're consuming, because of your job, hundreds of hours a month of content. And then you're working with people in all kinds of varied industries, whether it's from the service provider to the coach to the tech company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what's the thing I'm forgetting to ask you that's just interesting about the current business or the current state of like business and marketing? And what's the secret knowledge that Hector has that I forgot to hit on?
Well, we don't really talk about YouTube, but I think YouTube is, it's not like it's new, but I don't think that, I think we're going to look back in 5 years and see like, wow, we didn't see what YouTube was going to become. And in 5 years, you've got YouTube TV, you've got YouTube music, obviously, the standard YouTube. But then the other part that I think people aren't really realizing is that the kids are already fucking locked into YouTube as well. So it's like, that ecosystem is not going away. And I think that for businesses specifically, there's still time to like be the mortgage guy in Boise, Idaho, and to make YouTube videos and to be and to use that as a platform to, in the same way that one of our good friends, Tim Rode, he made his thing doing TV commercials, and he was just a hoot on, I think he was jumping out of planes and just doing crazy shit on commercials. And that's how he built his real estate business. And in the same way that people can leverage media.
And this was like, what, 25 years ago?
Yeah. He was like making like TV commercials, like whatever that process was like.
Right.
Now all people have to do is shoot something on their iPhone and upload it to YouTube. So I think that is, it's not that it's new, but I don't think people are giving it the weight that it probably deserves.
One of the few real estate channels I follow is his name escapes me right now, but he's a realtor in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I have no intentions of ever moving to Coeur d'Alene, but somehow I watched one of his videos and it was super like interesting. And it drew me in. It was like, today I'm going to show you the 5 lake houses for sale in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I'm like, cool. I wonder what a lake house in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And he went to like the $400,000 one, the $1.4 million one, and like the $4 million one. I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. So now the algorithm knows that I've spent, an hour watching this guy's content. It keeps feeding it to me. I keep watching it, but it's like, it's so weird because I never have a reason to think about Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, except for, turns out, my buddy David was going to move to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I'm like, oh, you got to hit up this realtor, bro. I watch his YouTube channel. He's like, what? He's like, why are you watching a YouTube channel of a guy talking about real estate in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho? I'm like, I don't know, because it's interesting. So that dude sold my friend a $700,000 house. He made $20,000 in commission because he had a YouTube channel that hit a guy in Los Angeles, California, who had no intention whatsoever of moving to Idaho. I mean, the network effect of what he's putting up, and it's polished and it's well done. And I'm sure he's paying an editor and a drone photographer and stuff. So there's definitely an investment from him, but he's just leaned in and I'm sure he's killing it. Because if he's getting a referral from me, he's definitely like the local expert.
Right. And I think it's so possible for people now. But there is a window. I think it's a window is shrinking in terms of how soon you can still, and it might be in 5 years, it's something else. There's some other platform that people can, grow awareness and build awareness on.
I thought it was going to be Clubhouse, but as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, that died real fast.
Yeah. I don't think they had a real shot from the beginning. Frankly, it was just the timing helped it, but it wasn't a full app. It was like, I mean, the whole debate was like, is it an app or is it a feature? You know, so.
I hope the founders cashed out when they could, because there was a moment where it was the most popular thing in the country, and I hope they got out and didn't think they were gonna. I hope they didn't do the Netflix thing and they sold to Blockbuster when the timing was right. So last two questions, and I may have asked you this before, but I always think it's good revisiting every podcast. One is, again, we're beginning of 2024. What are you most looking forward to this year, either in your business or personally or whatever? What are you most looking forward to this year? And then favorite movie and why?
So I'm looking forward to doing more of these in-person podcasts. I think that's they're fun. They're a different vibe, but I also think it's going to be more of the standard. I don't know if a requirement necessarily, but it's going to be more of the standard.
Yeah, people are zoomed out, right?
Yeah. And also there's, on YouTube, when we talk about this Modern Wisdom show, Chris Williamson, if anyone who's watching this can get me connected with Chris, I want to bring him on my show. I look up to him a lot, but one of the things that I know that he has a mind for that I don't is like the cinematography of it, right? The lighting and the setting and the setup and all that sort of stuff. And his show has nothing to do with lighting and cinematography, but he's taking that level of care and that depth of production. And so I think that more and more of the expectation from listeners and viewers is going to go up. And so that's why if you start now, that expectation is at the lowest it's ever going to be. It's only going to go up in terms of what people are wanting. So I'm excited to do this. We're going to do Vegas was our first stop. We're thinking about doing another stop in Phoenix, and we'll see where else after that.
Awesome. Yeah, you got to do something in person with Qasim.
Yeah, Qasim and Nate are out.
Yeah, it's funny because Qasim, mutual friend of ours, who played really hard, and I think he publicly had an exit in the space of like Google and SEO and all that stuff. He's just a brilliant guy. I was talking to him, and he said because of YouTube, and he also thinks, even though YouTube's the second biggest search engine in the world and like maybe the first most visit website in the world, he said even with as big as it is, he agrees with you that it's probably in some type of toddler stage. And he said because coaching is becoming so ubiquitous on YouTube and you can find pretty much any topic, and because of ChatGPT, like if you wanted to create a CRM for loan officers, it's just getting easier and easier and the barrier to entry is getting lower and lower. He seems to think, and I tend to agree with him, that in the future, it'll be coaching or a service and. So it's like, oh, you do coaching and you provide them with their software or their CRM or their marketing capability. And if you have a CRM, it better be a CRM with a biannual live event where you bring all your people together, or training community, something like that. He's like, because YouTube is going between YouTube and ChatGPT, there is going to be at some point in the near future, if Scott wants to spend a weekend developing a CRM for, loan officers, which used to be 6 months and $100,000, it's going to be a weekend and $2,000. And, eventually if somebody wants great mortgage coaching, they can go to my channel and they can watch, 4/5 of the stuff that I deliver to my coaching clients for free. And so what we've really leaned into is having like quarterly live events where we bring people together in community and we work together. We even kind of this year started pioneering this idea of like work together, where we just had 11 people sleeping at my house, 2 of them on the floor. And we would spend the day like, hey, how do you set up your email? Like, let's make sales calls and kind of critique each other. Because if you don't have that community, your product is probably becoming less and less valuable.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. I joke that if I was born in another time or, in a previous lifetime, I was not the inventor. I was probably the guy like getting electrocuted on stage, just because I don't have that inventor mind. I see some of the people that develop these apps and these SaaS products and their brain it works differently. It's more of I'm the guy that if I see a problem, I'm going to shoestring 3 different services together and make an automation or duct tape it together so that it works, not build the one thing that does all these sorts of stuff. And so when I see that, I'm like, damn, I felt like I was like, missing out on a golden goose, because, with SaaS, it's like there's the continuity and monthly recurring, it's a sticky sort of, business and all that sort of thing. And so I was kind of like, I don't know if down is the right word, but I was I was like, okay, well, what's my solution to that? And what I realized is that in probably equal need to SaaS or software or tools is community, right? Especially today. And what's nice about community is that, it's ongoing and more people are willing to pay for that community, right? I mean, we're part of a couple of paid masterminds and groups, and I even look at like things like, I saw some statistics that like these dating apps are just crushing it because because they have paid, these paid tiers or whatever it is, and people are alone and starving for connection community that they're willing to pay these apps, egregious amounts of money just for like the hope and chance of being able to connect with somebody. And so if you can, if you're a real estate agent or if you're a loan officer or whatever sort of service that you're providing, if you can create community around that, like you said, that's the differentiator, because like, loans might be commoditized even more than they are at some point, but the community and the ability to be around either whatever that community is, right? Like that community can be different. So there's this guy, Alex Soto. He started Pantone 294. It's a, I guess the closest thing is like a baseball fan club is what it started out as. And then he built out his, the events where he would take people to the other stadiums. He built out a busing, company to bring people to the stadium for home games. He's got like a clothing line. He's got a shop. So all these businesses all based around, the same customers.
All just Dodger fans.
All Dodger fans.
That's amazing. And how scalable, right? Because it's like now you could do this for football and you could do it for other baseball teams. I mean, like, and look, if you're a diehard Dodger fan who's traveling to away games with like a community, you're probably also the type of person who's a diehard Laker fan who wants to have a travel experience to go to see the Celtics play, the Lakers or something. Kings game's probably cheaper because nobody likes Sacramento Kings. Shout out to Matt Gouget, the only Sacramento Kings super fan who I know. All right, last question. Favorite movie and why?
I'll give you two. First is The Sandlot. That's the first one. That's the one I grew up on. And I mean, just classic, being a baseball kid in Southern California. It was just like, I don't know how many times I've watched that one. And the other was Varsity Blues, which is kind of in a similar sense. But
yep.
I played a lot of sports growing up. And so, and I had a rather, I went to Catholic school. So I saw these guys, having a great time in high school. I was like, maybe.
You're like, wait a minute. These girls wear whipped cream bikinis? Yeah, this is what happens at public school?
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking.
Exactly. I feel like there's two types of men. There's men who love coming of age stories and movies and TV shows. And then there's men that don't. And I don't trust the men who don't. I really don't. Like, if I tell somebody that my favorite show growing up was The Wonder Years, and they're like, yeah, I didn't think it was that good. I'm like, I immediately look at you through a different lens. Because, like, these coming-of-age shows and movies, like, I love The Sandlot. And funny, total non-sequitur. Well, I guess not a non-sequitur. It's related. My buddy Robert DeRosa, Chris's older brother, went to high school with Mike Vitar, the guy who's the main character, or the one who makes it into into Major League Baseball. And it's so funny because he was in that. He was in the Mighty Ducks. He was in a couple other movies. And, like any teenager who's a celebrity, a little hard to deal with, right? He had a pager back in the day. Yeah. Like, that was super cool. Yeah. And he knew he was super cool. And then the dude was just like, fuck Hollywood. I want to be a fireman. So he's a fireman in like Granada Hills now or something, somewhere in LA. You can look it up. And it's wild because this child actor who, like, every man our age, and my kids recently watched The Sandlot and they love it. So there's like multiple generations now of people who look up to Mike Vitar's character. And he's just like your average bro fireman, couple kids, probably lives in Santa Clarita like every other fireman in LA. And it's funny, man. Any other coming of age movies that you love? Like, I love all the American Pies, like anyone where there's like that teenage angst. I just relate with that at such a high level.
Have you seen Stand By Me?
Oh, 100 times.
I mean, it's a little different of an energy vibe movie, but that one too is something that I can watch like over and over again.
Yeah, and like everybody in that movie became a superstar in their own right, except for River Phoenix, God rest his soul. Everybody in there, Will Wheaton went on to like be on Star Trek for a decade, and then the fat kid, like, he ended up becoming a stud. What the hell is his name?
I haven't kept up with
who was you'll know who he is as an actor. We're gonna have to like pop his, because it's like he was the fat kid in Stand By Me. And then later on in life, he got super yoked. And I've seen all these side by sides, like him as a kid and him as just this like studded out, almost superhero type looking character when he was doing sitcoms in like his 20s and 30s. And it's just a funny juxtaposition. Like, oh yeah, boys grow up. I think the only guy who didn't do anything is the main character, who's like the nerdy kid that they accept into the club, right? It's like he just what was his name? No, he ended up doing great stuff too. The one with the glasses who like had the crazy father. Anyway, everybody in Stand By Me ended up doing great things. And then of course, cameo at the end by Kiefer Sutherland. And it's like the whole cast is amazing.
Have you seen that movie Inside Out?
Yeah.
That's like one of the, we have to temper ourselves with Disney sometimes, but that's one of the movies that I'm like good with my kids watching.
Yeah.
We can watch that one.
You know, they're coming out with a sequel, right?
I hope so.
Yeah. The sequel comes out, I think, this summer, and it's the daughter who the, emotional characters are in her brain. She becomes a teenager. And so now there's new characters introduced of like, oh, I have angst and I have like social awareness and stuff. And it's like, I hope they kill it and they don't mess this up. Cause yeah, Inside Out is one of those, it's like a timeless animated movie that I could watch with my wife or I could watch with my kids.
Right.
It's good stuff.
And you can watch it over and over again. And I'm the type of person that like, if I'm going to watch a movie, I'm like, well, what's the lesson I'm going to learn from it? Or what's the moral of the story? And it's just like, each time you watch it, there's like some other layer and the nuance that you catch it. And it's good for the kids too. Cause Lord knows my kids need it.
Yeah, I need to learn how to control the little red anger guy. Like that's as I get older and probably testosterone levels fall, I'm getting better at managing the anger side of it. So, hey, Hector, man, thanks for being on, dude. And first of all, thanks for driving all the way out here to Vegas. It's been a long time coming that we're going to do this in person. And yeah, man, let's have you back on towards the end of the year and see how many hundreds of podcasts you guys are now servicing, because tech tools and AI are making it easier.
I look forward to it.
Talk soon.